Hey guys, what is up? Welcome back to a brand new episode of Cage Chat. Now, over the weekend we had UFC Brooklyn live on ESPN, the first of the UFC and ESPN partnership. Now, I did predict these fights on my Instagram at CageChatYT and did get 7 of the 13 fights correct. Now, kicking off the video, we're starting off with Joanne Calderwood, who defeated Ariane Lipski, a UFC debutant, via unanimous decision. It was an incredible fight, but Joanne Calderwood did show off her UFC experience inside the cage, and Ariane Lipski did look like the novice and the person who had not been inside the octagon before, obviously coming back from a Muay Thai background. Now, I do believe Lipski does have a future here, and starting off with 0-1 in the UFC will benefit her career. She can take that loss, she can build on it and build up from having the experience of a fight week inside the UFC, especially one as large as Brooklyn, which had all eyes on it thanks to it being the ESPN's first fight of the era. Now, she did call out Jessica Ai, who is ranked 1 inside the flyweight division. Now, I do believe that Joanne Calderwood did do enough to earn herself at least a top 5. I believe if she gets 2 more wins, then she could face the champion potentially, and she seems to be on the right track now. I hadn't seen her fight before this, or not of memory, but she did have a very good fight. Her promotional side did have a lot of benefits thanks to Ariel Helwani, who was on the MMA Hour who interviewed her, and she did come across very sweet. She's a Scottish sweetheart, but obviously inside the cage, she's very much that Braveheart character, an absolute fiery figure, and she was looking for that submission. She was in fact pretty disappointed, as she said in her post-fight interviews, that she didn't get a finish in a submission or inside a TKO. I'd also like to mention that with the vibe that Joanne Calderwood gives off, the hair shaving, the very humble attitude, and a very all-round nice person, she does give me off the vibe of a Rose Namajunas, who's now strawweight champion. When Namajunas was building her way up, she did shave her hair, she changed her attitude, and she then went on to become champion, beating Joanna Jędrzejczyk twice, who could potentially be the next opponent for Joanne Calderwood, depending on if Joanna is then in the flyweight division, that is. Now, yes, closing out UFC Brooklyn's ESPN card and prelims was Donald Cowboy Cerrone versus Alexander Hernandez. Now, Hernandez, 3 fights inside the UFC, and Cowboy, well, he was having his 40th fight, maybe 50th fight in the cage, and it showed. He put him to bed in a dominant fashion inside a TKO inside the second round. His knees and his distance covering was beautiful to watch from a fan's perspective, and Alex Hernandez didn't have the game plan to counteract that. He did come out and say that he only was really focusing on a first round finish and that he wasn't prepared for a fight, whereas Cowboy Cerrone, having all that experience inside the cage, knew exactly what was going to happen. And since the announcement of moving down to lightweight, he has put himself back in the mix for a potential championship opportunity. Now, he's probably one fight away, maybe 2. Now, this depends on what Conor and Khabib get in the Nevada State Athletic Commission committee, and if they get any suspensions or what happens there, titles being lost, which I doubt. But he did call out Conor McGregor, and I think that is the fight next to Cowboy. He deserves it as a veteran inside the UFC. It's a money fight for Cowboy, and Conor's very much on a backwards steep at the moment. Of course, he's only ranked number 2, but he does have to fight those guys within these ranks to really warrant a championship opportunity again. Now, I'd also like to see maybe Dustin Poirier or Tony Ferguson. Now, I'm going to make a video about Dustin Poirier because I do feel sorry for him as well with what's happened to his career over the past 2 months. Now, Paige VanZant returned after suffering a broken arm last year in January, and she came back in very good fashion. She had a poor first round, it was more of a very comparative first round for both fighters. It was given a 10-9 to Rachel Ostovich, but in the second round, Paige VanZant switched up her game, took it more to the floor, and was able to get the finish via submission due to an armbar. Now, after the fight, there was very raw emotion to see. Paige VanZant obviously returning. You could tell on her face that it meant a lot to her, and of course, we know with Rachel Ostovich the background that she's coming from over the past 2 months to where she was on this fight. Now, one unhappy man due to success is Joseph Benavidez. Benavidez did get a unanimous decision against Dustin Ortiz, which I believe was fight of the night. Personally, I thought that fight was fight of the night. The 2 flyweights absolutely going at it. And it's always a great contest to see. Two flyweights, the younger guys getting around the cage so quickly, their jiu-jitsu, the transition from side control, let's say, to mount and taking the back and etc. They do it better than anyone else pretty much. And it's, you know, the heavyweights are a lot slower, so they hit harder, but the movement you see in the lighter rankings is something spectacular. And the flyweight division needs to be kept, and that is something we'll be talking around. And that is something we'll be talking about in the next parts of the video. Now moving on to the co-main event, we did have Greg Hardy making his UFC debut. He was obviously on the Tuesday Night Contender Series, fought in a lot of the local circuits, and he did not have a night to remember. He had a very good first round, but in the second round he decided, or he said, mistimed a knee whilst his opponent Crowder did have a knee and two hands on the cage mat, which is obviously an illegal knee. So this fight was disqualified, and rightfully so. Dan Miragliotta calling it to perfection there, and it's not the way he wanted to start this year after his history and his background. Again, he's not made himself any more supporters, but he'll be back inside the octagon in the coming months, and hopefully he can sort of rebuild his chapter and rebuild the story of the fighter with a darkened history making his return. And my god, does he hit hard. Now moving on to the main event, it was TJ Dillashaw, bantamweight champion, against Henry Cejudo, the messenger, as flyweight champion. And oh boy did he deliver his message, calling out TJ Dillashaw for bantamweight next. But back to the fight, he did in fact beat TJ Dillashaw within 32 seconds of the first round that he dominated, hit him a lot, and there was calls for an early stoppage, but I do believe after being hit that many times inside 20-25 seconds, it was very much similar to the Cyborg Nunes fight. It was the right call, and I can see why TJ Dillashaw and UFC President Dana White both agree with the early stoppage. Now, there was a question from Dana White that the referee inside the cage of the main event is one of the inexperienced. Now, this is probably something that is true. It wasn't a regular face you'd see on the UFC like Dan Miragliotta is, or previously Big John McCarthy. So yes, maybe they need to focus on the referee structures within the cards. Maybe the main event needs to have an experienced referee in there who knows what he's doing. But Henry Cejudo remained flyweight champion, and there is a slither of hope for the flyweight division to stay. Now, I said earlier Joseph Benavidez did get the victory, and I would like to see Joseph Benavidez versus Henry Cejudo next, rather than Cejudo move up to TJ Dillashaw's bantamweight level. So overall, UFC Brooklyn was a success, and it started off the ESPN era perfectly. We have the new belt, which I'll be making a video on shortly, and we have the bright future ahead of us. The shows itself, the actual production of the show was very much one of high quality, having Bisping on the desk. We had the same people from Fox. We also had Rashad Evans on there, and they did it pretty well, I must admit. So yes, drop a like on this, comment what you thought of UFC Brooklyn and the ESPN era. Who would you like to see Cejudo face next, Benavidez or TJ Dillashaw? Comment, subscribe,